Micromanaging bosses create a huge amount of bad feeling and problems for so many people out there. If this is affecting you, what I'd like to do over the next 5 minutes or so is share with you some things that you may like to think about in terms of what is going on in this situation and what might be behind this behaviour, and also suggest a couple of strategies that you might be able to start to use to alleviate the situation and to reduce the amount of micromanaging that you're subjected to. So to begin with, the first consideration is the emotional reaction. And by that I mean your reaction. And I think this is important to recognise that a lot of the angst that is caused by the micromanager is because of the emotional reaction that you are, quite naturally sort of having. And part of that is because there is a lack of trust, or at least there is a perceived lack of trust. So really what's happening with the micromanaging boss, their behaviour is suggesting to you that they don't trust you. And I don't know about you, but when I find people are not trusting me, not believing me, not accepting my word for things, I get a bit upset. And so you are too. And the reason why I say this is because, recognise this in yourself. There's nothing wrong with having an emotional reaction, but an emotional reaction is not necessarily going to help you to find the solution. One of the ideas that I've got for you, which may actually appear a little bit strange, is that part of the explanation for why they are micromanaging you might be because they care too much. It suggests that the work that you're engaged in, they're really interested in. Many people are complaining because they don't get enough attention from their boss and they don't get enough face time, but you're getting lots of it. And so part of your adjustment and responding to your emotional reaction is to recognise, okay, it's because they're really interested, they really care about the results that we're getting here or that I'm working on, and that should make you feel good. So it's not always a bad thing. It doesn't explain or it doesn't excuse the behaviour, but it's certainly something to just bear in mind. The other thing that might be going on in the mind of the boss as they decide to micromanage is that there's a vulnerability there. Maybe something that you're doing is of critical importance to some of their key stakeholders, and if you don't get it right, maybe they could be fired, or maybe they could drop down in the performance rankings on the annual appraisal. So the work that you're doing could be of great importance, because if you get it right, you are securing the position of your boss, and if you get it wrong, they could be in a very, very sticky situation as well. So again, this is background considerations just to think of what might be driving the behaviour. Another thing, and let's be honest, some people are habitual micromanagers. They do it because they've always done it. They do it with everybody. They seem to have this absolute need to be in command of all of the detail. And that's, for some people, that's the way they've grown up and the way they have become successful. Okay, so the habitual micromanager is something that you need to recognise, because there are different things that you can do if that is the case. And really, I suppose this is coming to the final consideration that it may just be the way they are. And, that could lead you to the view that, well, there's nothing you're actually going to do to change it. So given the emotional reaction, maybe you need to just accept that is the way they do things. But you don't need to give up, and there are some things that you can try. And so let me go through a number of strategies that you might be able to deploy to at least start to alleviate and change the behaviour that you're not comfortable with. The first one is to really go through everything that we've already talked about and relate it to your situation and start to think, okay, why is it that they're so interested in the work that you're doing? What is the nature of it? And in many other parts of this course, we're talking about analysing their agenda and looking at their priorities. And maybe this fits very well into that consideration. So think about, what is it that they're interested in and why they are so interested. So those two sort of go hand in hand. But what I'm trying to do here is suggest that you need to come up with a rationale, an explanation that might be explaining the behaviour that you're being subjected to. Another thing you can do once you've got that is to actually acknowledge their interest, acknowledge that they really care. And that's really important because it's about a two-way communication between you and your boss. You've got to be able to communicate openly. You want them to communicate openly. You want a high degree of trust. So you need to recognize their position and, in a way, feel flattered that they are so interested. And that may seem a little bit strange to you at the moment if you're having a real hard time with the micromanager, but again, bring those emotions down a little bit, look at it a little bit more clinically, and then start to acknowledge, okay, I can understand why you're so interested in this, and what we need to do. And this is moving into step number 4, is engage them in saying, so how can I make you feel more comfortable about this situation or about the work that I'm doing? Is there a particular part that you're not sure about? And so on. So you start to actually bring them into a debate about not criticizing the behavior and saying leave me alone and let me get on with it, but actually respecting that they've got a legitimate interest, and how can you help them to pacify, I suppose, their care and their consideration and their desperate need to know what's actually going on. And so think about that and actually start to bring them into the debate, because it's only if you two can agree that you'll start to get a solution that can be I suppose really reinforced over the next weeks and months after you deploy these strategies. And I think the final thing to really remember is that you've got to respect their interests. Now, a lot of people, and particularly if you're somebody who is a good performer and you're used to getting the job done, and you've got a good track record, it's almost like a slight to you when somebody comes to try and micromanage what you're doing, because you're highly competent and you should be able to get on. But they're your boss. They've got a real vested interest in your success, and they have every right to know what's actually going on, what it is you're doing. To actually say, look, just leave it with me and I'll come back in a month's time and deliver you the result, is leaving them in a very insecure position. So at the very least, you need to be saying, look, I've got no worries. I've done this time and time again, but how can I keep you in the loop so that you know what's going on? What involvement do you need to be able to feel comfortable that I'm making the right sort of progress for you? Something like that. So please do think about the background considerations. What is it that's driving this behaviour? And then start to consider these strategies for actually starting to have a different sort of conversation with your micromanaging boss. And hopefully it's just somebody who cares so much that they really want it to get right.